Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to Counselor's Couch 101. I'm Jim Stump. I thank you for dropping by. Please let me know what interests you, what kind of topics you'd like to see discussed here, and we will do our best to post something on those items of your interest. Recently, I received emails asking me if I were an empath. Now, I take that to mean an empath is someone who can feel the feelings of other people. So if you're in close proximity to someone and you're picking up vibrations or a sensation or a mood or something like that, the idea is, is an empath tapped into that other person and feeling what that other person is feeling? I have a theory about that. I can't prove it. I don't want to argue about it. I don't want anybody to think that I'm strange or unusual, even though that is the case. But it's just a theory. It's a thought that I developed over years of having worked with people and having come across certain information, right, about empathy and empaths. I think we all have that ability, right? I think it's a native ability to the human body, the human spirit, the combined capability of what we're born with as human beings. And like I say, I developed that over time. The first time I can remember thinking about this was years and years and years ago. I saw a documentary about Aborigines in Australia. And what happened was the Aborigines claimed that they could communicate just by using their mind, and they could communicate over vast distances. So there'd be someone out there walking around in the outback, right? And that person would communicate home and send a message, and the people at home, whoever's supposed to receive it, got the message and got it accurately and knew what was going on with the person who sent the message. Researchers doubted it and went out to study that phenomenon. It's amazing how my voice goes when I try to do these videos. I think it's psychosomatic. What do you guys think? Anyway, researchers went out to research this phenomenon to see if it was true or not. So they had one researcher stay with someone back home, so to speak, and a second researcher went out with someone who was walking out in the outback. And 1,100 miles away, they gave a message to the man who was walking out in the outback to send back to home. And it turned out that the gentleman there who sent the message was able to send it, and the one at home was able to receive it. And they tested it several times, and they found out that it was accurate, right? The messages could be sent and received accurately. Now, researchers were trying to figure out how that could be, right? Because they questioned whether or not that was some sort of a special ability of this particular group of people, the Aborigines of Australia. There are other people have come along and done similar experiments or have had experiences with that kind of thing, and they start to think, well, maybe this is more of a broad ability to human beings rather than to one particular group of people, right? And it's one thought was that the only reason the Aborigines are able to do it so well is because they believe in it and they used it. It was a common occurrence for them. They developed the technique to a more proficient level because they used it. They perfected it in some ways, right? Years after that, after the documentary, I came across more information that's saying the United States federal government was looking into something and researching something they called distance viewing. Distance viewing. What they would do is they would have people in a room and they would train them. They take a group of people who they thought were empathetic or empaths. They would train them in certain techniques, and then they would test them. They would ask them to go somewhere and look at something and to describe it or to draw it or both. And they're going to check the impressions that people got back in the lab to the actual place, because they would have their people out on those places either saying, yes, this is an accurate description, or no, it's not. They wanted, the federal government wanted to use it for military purposes. They wanted to go and spy out enemies, so to speak. They wanted to go to distant places and check out what was going on and listen into conversations, if at all possible, and send it back, right? And as for me, more directly and more personally, I've had feelings about people. Like I've told you many times, I did a lot of groups back in the day, many group meetings a week, and I would get feelings from these various people. I could tell whether or not, or at least I thought I could tell whether or not a meeting was going to be successful or not successful, depending on the way I felt when I walked into the room. At that time, I was working in a clinic, and there were a lot of rooms, office rooms, meeting rooms, all up and down the building. And I'd walk down the hallway, and then when I stepped through the doorway, I was immediately hit with some sort of a feeling. And I always paid attention to that. I always said to myself, is this going to be a good meeting or not, depending on who's here? I've also had the feeling, the experience of sitting in a room thinking, okay, this is going to be a wonderful meeting. Everybody here seems to be in a good place. I think they want to share today. I think they're going to open up. I think we're going to make some progress. And then someone walks through the door and the entire feeling of the room changes, right? The whole emotional impact has been turned at least 180. I've had those experiences, and I have wondered what is happening, what is causing this to be, and why am I feeling this way? Now, to be sure, in personal experiences, folks can be picking up on body language and the attitude, a look on the face, a scowl, a tone of voice. You can pick up on that stuff, and they can tell you a lot about the feeling of the person that you're interacting with. That is very true, right? So it could be a lot of that. But then on other times, you can feel people who are not necessarily in the room or close to you in proximity, etc. And still, I'm wondering, okay, how can this be, right? I didn't think I had any particular special abilities. I don't think I'm any more psychic or less psychic than anyone else, right? But I was aware of these sensations, and I knew that I could rely on them. If I had a feeling about something, then most likely the feeling was accurate, and it would give me a reading on the room. Now, you could say it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. In other words, if I had a negative feeling about something, I caused that meeting to go into a negative place. If I had a positive feeling about something, I caused it to go into a positive place. We could say that. I'm sure that has viability too. It has an impact on the discussion we're having here. Then I came across a gentleman on the internet, by the way, on YouTube actually, by the name of Bruce Lipton. Now, Bruce Lipton was, I don't know how to say it, I'm probably going to say it wrong. I think he was a biochemical researcher. I hope I got that correct. But you can look him up on YouTube. He has many videos. Bruce Lipton. I suggest you do go check out some of his videos if you're interested in this subject. And Bruce Lipton did his research for many decades, and he taught medical doctors what he was learning in his research, working with chemistry in the body and so forth. And he finally got to a point where he did an experiment. He took 3 petri dishes, petri dishes, right? And he put a biochemical, the same biochemical divided into 3 of the petri dishes. And then he did an experiment. He had positive thoughts toward one of them. He had negative thoughts toward another of them. And a third one is a control group. You don't do anything to it. And he said you could positively tell the difference between the positive, the negative, and the control group petri dishes. He said the power of the mind has the ability to affect things in the physical world. In this case, it has the power of the mind has the ability to affect body chemistry, right? Now, this is not a new idea. I'm trying to think of the name of that book that was out. I think it was called, not The Attraction, but it's the idea that if you think positive thoughts, you get positive things. You put out a positive message in the world and it comes back to you. That belief has been long held, right? It really has. It's been around for centuries that this is possible to affect your world and your life by the way you're thinking, okay? Bruce Lipton did these experiments, and he came to the belief that everything he had been teaching and telling the doctors for decades was entirely wrong. He gave up his position at a prestigious university, and he gave up his research studies there associated with those connections, and he went off and went in a different direction and started looking at different aspects of the human anatomy and capability, right? started looking at different things and how the world really is different than what we think it is and what it looks like, right? There's something else going on. Maybe it's on a, I don't know, electromagnetic level, an energy level. They say, you put energy out, energy back. Bruce Lipton was finding out that that is absolutely true. And the thing is, it's not hocus pocus, it's not mysticism, it's not any kind of demonology or anything of the sort. It is an area, an aspect of the human condition that science has not yet fully researched and looked into, and discovered how it works, and was able to tell everybody else how this process goes into play. Another thing I found interesting, just a side note, have any of you seen old sci-fi movies where these aliens from different dimensions or planets or something come into the scene, and they have very, very large heads and they don't talk? They communicate via telepathy. Now that's another idea that's been around a long time. Where did that idea come from? Oftentimes people say that science fiction leads the way into other things in the world. In other words, science fiction predicts something and it creates it by describing it and putting that thought out in the world, and then we create it. It could be that, or maybe science fiction writers were picking up on some sort of a knowledge, and they shared that knowledge, whether they were aware of it or not. They're picking up that this was a possibility, and they just put that idea out into the world for other people to think about and possibly to research. So we come to these group meetings and people ask me if I'm an empath, right? And other people have said, is it being an empath, or is it some sort of ESP, right? Extrasensory perception. Well, maybe maybe it's a combination of both. Maybe we're just playing with words here, where we're dancing around vocabulary and we're describing the same thing, maybe different aspects of the same thing, or maybe just different ways of describing the same thing, right? Is something going on there that is real, and can we study it? Can we master it? And can we put it to our use, right? I'm convinced that we can. Once again, I have no proof. It's just ideas that I've come across over the years, and I found through personal experience and looking into them, sort of putting them into practice when I was working with people to see whether or not any of it has any validity and they held up over time, right? Which leads me to another experience I had. Years ago, I was asked to participate in a week-long seminar for ministry students, people who were studying to be ministers. And I was asked to do a class on counseling. You know how ministers are expected to do counseling with the people that are in their churches and so on and so forth. And a lot of people would go out into the ministry or the field and they say, I have no training in this. I can't work with these people because I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to make of what they're telling me. And I don't want to harm them. So this group asked me to do a short week-long seminar. I had about 90 minutes or 2 hours a day for 5 days. That was it. The entire length of time that I had to present psychology to this group, right? And counseling techniques. So I tried to think of a way, how can I do it that quickly? Because I've been studying for years and I certainly don't know very much about the field, because there's so vast amount of information out there that most of us can't absorb it all. Most of us tend to concentrate in a particular area and absorb as much information in that area and become more expert in an area than in a general idea and try to do it all, be a jack of all trades. So what I did was I divide up each lesson into a different kind of a disorder, and I was picking the most common ones that I thought ministers were likely to come into contact with, the types of issues and problems that parishioners would come up to them and ask them about, right? So I divided that up, and I had about 5 major areas for that. And I discussed the disorder, and then we discussed ways to address it. And through this week, I'm pouring out all this information that I've studied and gathered and learned through experience over the years, trying to cram all this information into these 5 lessons, these 5 days, and into this group of ministerial students, right? And after I had finished that week and I was able to go away from that intensity of that seminar and reflect on what had happened there, I thought to myself that I had done exactly the wrong thing. It's not bad to have information about psychology and counseling techniques if you're going to be a minister. That's not bad at all. But in the space of 5 days, I could not put all that information into their heads. I probably confused them or scared them. Um, and I had sort of a feedback on that because at the end of the week, I asked people, how they felt about it and whether or not they felt they could work with their parishioners if they walked up to them with these problems. And nearly 100% of the people in the room said, what I think I would do in that situation was I would call someone else. In counseling circles, we say we would refer them out. We would find somebody that was better equipped to deal with those problems. They came away from that week thinking they couldn't do the work, right? And they didn't even want to start it. They didn't want to hurt anybody. They would call up somebody else who had experience in that area. And then I realized I had done the wrong thing. What I should have done there, and what I recommend to any of you who are interested in the subject and want to better relate to people in your life and improve your relationships and so forth, I would tell them to get quiet and sit with their feelings and see if they had any sort of a feeling or reaction to the person that they're talking with. Now, I have this hypothetical situation that the person has become a minister at a church and a parishioner comes up with a problem. I would say sit with that person or that couple, right? And just perceive, if you can, let go of all your feelings and let the reaction you're getting to that person fill up your being and your emotional space, right? And the idea is if we can allow the other person to enter into how we're feeling now, we can understand what they're feeling. And the question is whether or not that is accurate. Does it work to sit with someone and try to pick up on what they're feeling? I believe it does. And if you want to call that empathy or being an empath, that's fine with me. I think it is a very natural thing. I think it is something that the human condition can do without any in-depth study. It's just a question of, like the Aborigines, if we put our attention on it, right? If we pay attention to it and we develop it over time, and we need to trust it, because oftentimes we'll think, well, that's crazy. This person can't be angry. This lady is smiling. She's cheerful. She's telling me this wonderful story. And yet I'm picking up all this negative emotion. We think that can't be true. But chances are excellent if we are in tune with that person. That is exactly what she's feeling. And she's probably trying to cover it up. When you start to figure that out, you might say something like, who are you angry at? I just get a sense about this. What are you angry at? What are you sad about? What causes you to feel depressed? Ask them those kinds of questions. When we can get into the emotional side of a person's experience, we don't need to have counseling technique and study behind us. We don't need it at all. All we need to do is identify what that person is going through and appreciate, reflect it back to the person so the person can see how that person is affecting other people around him or her. That's what we can do, and we can learn that in a pretty short time. And that's what I should have done for that week at that seminar for the ministerial students. Ask them to learn how to sit calmly and pick up the feelings of other folks, right? And then reflect that back to the other folks. And then let's see what comes out of that. Oftentimes, when we identify a feeling in the other person, it opens a floodgate and that person starts to share what's really going on inside of them. And a lot of times people tell me, the healing aspect of counseling is the fact that they are able to talk about things. We give them permission, we give them safety, right? And we give them understanding. We let them talk and share their reality, and that talk is the cure itself. We do not have to apply a technique. We don't have to go to school for decades and decades and decades, right? All we have to do is to feel that person and reflect that feeling back to the person. You want to call that empath or empathy? Fine with me. As long as it works, I'm fine with whatever term you want to put on it. I think more and more people, researchers are looking into these areas, and eventually I think they're going to discover all that in this aspect of the human condition that exists, and they're going to be able to build on it and create those aliens from outer space with the big heads who communicate via telepathy. ESP, empath, call it what you want. People ask me if I'm an empath. Like I said, that's how I started this. If what I've described to you means that I'm an empath, then fine. I will wear the label. I'll accept it. I don't take any credit for it. I don't think I'm particularly wonderful at it, but I do keep an awareness of it, and I try to use it to good purpose for folks. By the way, the last post I did, I read the opening pages of a book I had written, a novel entitled Shamarla, and I sort of hinted to this kind of thing in it. In the book, go back a post, and it's going to say Shamarla and introduction if you want to see it. It's not terribly long. But in the book, this lady, this woman who happens to be a counselor, she's hearing a voice. She's getting an impression from somebody, right? And that impression leads her to go look for the source of that impression. And as she does that, she discovers a baby. Turns out the baby was in a dumpster. And I was trying to hint at what I just tried to describe here today in this post, that we can communicate in this way. Now, that aspect of being an empath and communicating, whether by ESP or any other psychic means, is hinted at throughout the book, but it's only in certain places. It was not a major theme, but it was definitely a strong theme in the connection between this woman and this infant, right? And I tried to hint at it. The book was getting to be terribly long. I couldn't go into that aspect as deeply as I might have liked to. Maybe in some other writing, we'll see. But I hinted at it. So if you ever want to pick up that book, Shamarla, and read through it, and you're trying to figure out what the heck is going on, that part of it was what I was alluding to, this communication, nonverbal communication between a person and another person, an adult person in this case, and an infant in the other case, but still a communication. That's what I was trying to hint at. And I think if we go through life with that awareness, keeping our eyes open and looking for that type of reaction and experience to other people, I think we can benefit other people, and particularly ourselves, because we're starting to open up our understanding of the people in our lives, whether they be family members, loved ones, co-workers, neighbors, the minister at your church, church members, any sort of a group you belong to. You start to pick up on these things and realize that it is real, and what you're experiencing is valid, and start to use that wisdom. It can carry a long way. Business meetings, you can pick up on what the other person is going through, whether or not they're confident or if they think they have the upper hand, etc. And you can use it to your advantage. It's just a thought, something you might want to look into a little bit more deeply. Once again, I want to mention this name because I think it can benefit a lot of us. Bruce Lipton. He has videos all over YouTube. Bruce Lipton. Just listen to one of his videos. Understand where he's coming from. And if you want to get more into that subject, you can look into it there. He connects with all other sort of related sort of phenomena regarding human communication. So he might take you off in various other directions that you might find useful and interesting. Forgive me, folks. Believe it or not, when I talk with people, I do listening. I don't talk all that much. So talking this long in a string, it seems to affect my voice. I try to spend my time listening and understanding the other person than trying to fill them with some nonsense that I might be thinking or feeling. Bruce Lipton, empath, empathy, the power to communicate. Aborigines do it. Aliens from other planets and other dimensions do it. And I think human beings can do it too. And if you have an interest in that, go ahead and look into it. And if you want to check out that book just a little bit, go back to the post in front of this one, Shamarla, an introduction, and just listen to the open pages and understand that that's what I was trying to express and describe in those pages regarding the connection between human beings, right? So just something, when we know these sorts of things, it makes our understanding of literature and human interactions more interesting, more colorful. Bruce Lipton, Empath. I'll accept the blame if that's what it's going to be. I thank you for stopping by. I look forward to talking with you next time. Please get into the holiday spirit and enjoy your family and your loved ones. It goes so quickly. Enjoy. Next time. Thank you for stopping by.